Hello, everyone. I am Anastasiyya Denisova, and I'm an economist with social protection and labor global practice at the World Bank Group. I have led the development of the questionnaire for the SP Payments Tool. I would like to welcome you to the third of a series of webinars about SP Payment Delivery Mechanisms Tool that has been developed by a group of experts from different development partners that are part of interagency social protection assessment tools. In particular, this tool has been developed with technical support from Better Than Cash Alliance, CGAP, FAO, Government of France, GIZ, IPC, ILO, Save the Children, UKAID, UNDP, WFP, and led by the World Bank Group. For us, it's a real pleasure to be here with you today and to learn about your interest in social protection payments. So let me start with talking why are we here. We are here because we want to provide an overview of the SP Payments Delivery Mechanisms tool that is currently available in the ISPA site, which is www.ispatools.org. So what is the expected outcome of the webinar? So we want you to become familiar with the tool, understand how it works, and hopefully take the initiative to apply it in your own social protection program. We want to thank our colleagues from socialprotection.org who have worked hand in hand with us with a lot of patience in the organization of this webinar series and who have helped us to reach a very large audience. Now let me introduce today's panelists. HARISH NATARAJAN is a panelist. He will be discussing today's main presentation. He's a lead financial sector specialist at the World Bank Group, and he has been instrumental to bridge the social protection and the finance and markets world. HARISH's work focuses in assisting countries in improving safety, reliability, and efficiency of payments, remittances, and security settlement systems, and supporting countries in implementation of payment systems and payment system reforms. Prior to joining the World Bank, HARISH worked with Visa Inc., Citigroup, and other technology companies in the South Asia region in various senior level positions. Caroline PULVER is a lead consultant for the development of the tool. She's an experienced consultant based in Nairobi, Kenya, with extensive experience in the government-to-person payments. In fact, she has 18 years of experience in financial services, and last 7 years of this experience have been focused on financial inclusion and increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of cash transfers across Africa, with a very large portfolio. So it includes Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, Mozambique, South Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, and Zambia. And Asia as well. In Asia, in particular, the countries are India, Indonesia, Laos, and Nepal. QUANITA has been working as a social protection economist in the World Bank's Human Development Department in South Asia region for over 6 years. She has led policy, operational, analytical work in South Asia and Africa region, and focused on social safety nets, cash transfers, social security, youth employment, and labor, as well as disaster response. As part of the core social protection and labor team in Pakistan program, among others, she has the opportunity to lead the conceptualization and implementation of the ARSA grant for promoting financial inclusion and literacy among cash transfer beneficiaries in Pakistan by collaborating with the Central Bank of Pakistan. This task has helped in shaping the G2P technology-based payments to ultra-poor beneficiaries. She has extensive background in G2P payment systems and electronic cash transfers for social protection beneficiaries, including humanitarian and emergency cash transfers. Prior to joining the World Bank, she has worked as a long-term consultant for DFID, European Commission, GIZ, UNDP, and others as a monitoring and evaluation specialist in various human development and poverty-related policies and projects globally. QUANITA has studied economics and mathematics from London School of Economics and Political Science and did her postgraduate studies in international development and economics and public policy from University of York in United Kingdom. Also, I am very happy to introduce my co-moderator, SILVIA BAUR, who will be moderating session 2. She's a development economist with the Protecting Customers Initiative at CGAP. Her work focuses on consumer and behavioral research to inform the design of responsible and valuable form of financial services for the poor, including the design of consumer protection regulation and supervision tools. She also assists in CGAP's development of a community of practice focused on responsible digital finance, with which she is leading the work on digital payments to the poor. SILVIA's core competence is in consumer and behavioral research and empirical analysis, especially on transparency and disclosure, market conduct, agent and consumer behavior in the financial sector. She has consulted on private and financial sector development and developing markets with GOPA consultants, GIZ Ghana, Serious Microfinance in Paris, OICO Credit in Nicaragua and Germany. She holds MA in International Development Studies from Philipps University, Marburg, and BA in International Business Development and Intercultural Studies from Heilbronn University, Germany. And this is my favorite part, after which I was a little bit intimidated by the amount of languages I know. Silvia speaks German, English, Spanish, and French fluently, as well as some Italian and Arabic. So let me explain the agenda. This will be a slightly different webinar from the ones we had before because we wanted it to be a little bit more interactive. So we have created and really have an experience of how it feels to apply the tool. So we have created a case study which is available to you at socialprotection.org. If you didn't have a chance to read it, do not worry because we'll walk you through a majority of information that's in the study. And we will break the session in two sessions, actually. So one will be with Caroline, and she will walk you through the first part of the tool, explain you the basics of it, and then the background behind assessing the supporting environment, the social protection environment. And then we'll have a series of questions after that. After this part, we'll switch to Harish's presentation on assessment of payments mechanism, and we'll have another section of questions after this. So in the process of this, we really want you to think through how you would rank the country or assess the country based on the information we are giving you. Your rankings might not actually, or your ratings might not actually coincide with ours. And if you feel strongly about it or you have questions, that would be a great opportunity for us to learn, what are the questions that people have, and for you to also understand what exactly guides the logic behind the assessment. So without further ado, I would like to start today's webinar first with a super short background information on what is ISPA and how the tools can support your work on social protection issues. For further information on ISPA, we invite you to visit our website, which is www.ispatools.org, and to follow us on Twitter at ISPA Tools. Also, please follow today's conversation using the hashtag ISPA Payments. So let me switch to talking about ISPA. So what is ISPA? ISPA is a set of practical tools that help countries improve their social protection system by analyzing its strengths and weaknesses and offering options for further actions. So technically, the goal of ISPA tools is fourfold. First is ISPA is designed to bring together good practices from around the world and diagnose strengths and weaknesses, bottlenecks, and opportunities for social protection programs. The second one is that ISPA tools are really good to help governments facilitate policy discussion and build capacity. ISPA tools also help to harmonize the work of government agencies and international organizations. And lastly, they provide a great platform for international development organizations to coordinate country work in a way that builds and complements each other's competitive advantages. And from my short experience with doing pilots for this tool, I can tell you that ISPA definitely is well designed for all these four objectives. So the good thing about ISPA tools, or maybe even the great thing, is that they are used with they are designed with the idea of government actually taking the lead on this. So what are ISPA tools? ISPA tools can actually be categorized into three categories. The first one is the systems tools. Basically, they're there to assess country's social protection system and policies. They look at the whole social protection landscape of the country. They look at the performance of social protection programs against nationally defined objectives. And then this analysis allows the users to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the social protection system as a whole regarding its policy, legal, administrative, and delivery structures. An example of a tool in this category is CODI, which is a core diagnostic instrument, which does exactly what I have just described. The second part of ISPA tools are, the second category of ISPA tools are the program tools. And these tools are actually aimed at assessing particular programs and social assistance and social insurance schemes. Then based on national experience, the evidence and practice, these instruments help to assess different aspects of each type of government program scheme and identify areas for improvements in their design and implementation. Under this set of tools, we have developed the Public Works tool, which aimed to assess or inform the development of social protection public work programs. The last category of tools, which is the one into which our tool falls, is the delivery tools, which provide you governments with a tool to conduct an in-depth analysis of different delivery aspects. So they're essential for the deliveries, so they look at the aspects that are essential for the delivery of social protection benefits and include elements such as identification system, payment mechanism, and M&E framework. So in this category, there are currently two tools. One is identification tool, and the second one is the payments tool, which is the one we are going to talk about more. So what does an ISPA tool include? The ISPA tool is usually developed by actually 20 international or sometimes more than 20 international organizations and development partners. It also is developed in very strong partnership with governments. So in this way, the tools provide the unique expertise and know-how of different agencies, and each tool goes through a really rigorous development and approval process that includes field testing and at least 2 pilots. And each tool has e-learning introductory modules and communication materials, and also includes the ways to facilitate users to understand how to apply the tool. You don't have to apply all the tools, you can just choose the ones that suit your current needs the most. So each tool will have the core 5 elements, which is what matters guidance note. The note lays out technical foundation for assessment, provides good practices examples, provides instruction how to gather information, and describes how the assessment is organized. Then there is a questionnaire, which basically gathers qualitative and quantitative information, which is closely aligned with the what matters guidance note. And then there's an assessment matrix, which of course will be the result of what matters guidance and questionnaire. It helps the users to assess against the system against the agreed criteria on a 4-point scale that Caroline will talk a little bit more about. Lastly, there is a country report which presents the findings, highlights the strengths and weaknesses in relation to good international practice, summarizes complex landscape, and provides policy options to be used as jumping off point for future dialogue between stakeholders. And to bring it all together and to help you implement this, there are implementation guidelines which basically outline the process of application of ISPA tools from the start to completion. And from this point on, I will give the presentation to Caroline, who will actually walk you in detail through the ISPA tool for payments.
Thank you, Anastasia. If we can go to slide 7, ISPA payments tool. The objective of the payments tool is to assess payment delivery mechanisms that are used to deliver cash and near cash transfers and social protection programs. When we say cash and near cash, we effectively mean cash and vouchers, and specifically those programs that are primarily targeting the poor and vulnerable populations. There are 3 frameworks which are applied in a country assessment, and the guidance note, which you can find at www.ispatools.org, will talk you through those. So I'm just going to highlight those three matrices that are used. The supporting environment for social protection payments. That's effectively looking at the environment within a specific country and assessing how supportive it is to innovations within a payment delivery mechanisms to deliver social protection transfers. That's covered in pages 33 to 60 in the tool in the guidance notes section. There's also a country social protection system review, effectively an inventory taking, which is discussion of that inventory are made on pages 61 to 72. And then lastly, really the core of the work is the payment delivery mechanism assessment, which looks at a specific program or sometimes looks at a number of different programs. And that's covered within the guidance note in pages 73 to 94. Now within the tool, there are 3 assessment matrices that, that specifically talk to the implementation of an assessment in these 2 areas, and also the gathering of the inventory for the social protection system. And if you're referring to the tool itself, you'll find those on pages 148 is a supporting environment. 152, it looks at the country social protection system, and page 141 looks at the payment delivery mechanisms. The 3 criteria that you can see at the bottom of your page, accessibility, robustness, and integration, those are the 3 criteria that we use for the assessment of a payment delivery mechanism for a specific social protection program. So if we move on to slide 8, the assessment looks at supporting the work by effectively categorizing different types of situations into a 4-point scoring system. So when looking at payment delivery mechanisms, weaker or what we call latent payment delivery mechanisms receive a score 1, emerging payment delivery mechanisms receive a score 2, and the most advanced payment delivery mechanisms score a 4. What this means is for each of the 3 criteria, accessibility, robustness, and integration, there is a 4-point score which actually explains what a latent payment delivery mechanism looks like, what an emerging payment delivery mechanisms, and through moderate and advanced systems, effectively allowing assessors to compare the standards across those 4-point scores with the situation in their particular payment delivery mechanism. For the review of the supporting environment for social protection payments, again, we use a 4-point score. Again, we score a low, a 1 for a less supportive environment, and we score a 4 for a more supportive environment. The third part, which is the inventory of the country social protection system, is effectively, as an inventory would indicate, a descriptive table rather than a formal assessment. So there is no 4-point scoring for the country social protection system. So if we move on to looking at the supporting financial environment, the supporting environment for social protection payments, so we're on slide 10. There are effectively 4 different areas that the tool focuses on in order to assess how supportive or otherwise the environment is. The first area is really looking at the financial sector, which is made up of financial institutions, trying to assess the number and variety of financial institutions, the level of competition, the number of suitable products for the poorest, and therefore the choice of payment service providers that might be available to a particular social protection program. We also look at financial access points, the national coverage, the proximity of those financial access points to people's homes, particularly in those areas where social protection beneficiaries might be. Financial access points include bank branches, ATMs, bank agents, mobile money agents, SACCO offices, MFI offices. We also look at interoperability. So this is effectively the proportion of financial access points that can be accessed by a financial institution and its customers. The easy example to understand this was if you bank with Bank A and you want to withdraw from an ATM, can you use another bank's ATM, or are you just restricted to your own bank's ATM? We also look at the rules within the financial environment to understand how supportive it is. The key areas that we look at, there are 7 key areas that we look at to see how supportive the rules are. First, looking at agency rules. These are the agency rules issued by the central bank. Effectively, do they allow banks and or non-banks, such as mobile network operators, to provide service beyond branches? So what is the extent that that is allowed? We also look at the know your customer requirements. Effectively, the ability of low-income customers to meet the ID and proof of address requirements in order to open up a transaction account. What level of flexibility is that? We look at e-money guidelines, which effectively set whether or not non-traditional accounts can be offered and who can provide them, banks and non-banks. We also look at whether a basic bank accounts, these are low-cost, no-frill accounts which are suitable for the poor, are available within a country as well. Financial inclusion, the level of financial inclusion is that as defined by the International Survey Findex, and also looking at a government strategy, how supportive they are of financial inclusion. Procurement rules are very important as well, understanding whether procurement rules may undermine or support a social protection program if they're thinking about procuring a payment service provider. The issue of government payments is really one of economies of scale. Government payments include the disbursement of salaries and pension payments as well as social protection payments, and coordination across the G2P sector can support the development of suitable delivery mechanisms. We also look at ID, how strong and ubiquitous national ID is within a particular country, and lastly we look at mobile network coverage, effectively what percentage of the population is covered. Now we're going to go on to the next page, page 11. Which looks at our case study. So for our case study, we went to a country called Twiga, which is a low-income country of 60 million people, and we looked at their flagship program called We Are in This Together, the WAIT program. And the first thing we did is we tried to assess how supportive the environment was for social protection payments. So I'm just going to highlight some of the key findings in Twiga. The retail banking infrastructure is dominated by 3 banks. They do have agency banking in Twiga that's offered by 6 banks, but not all banks do actually have bank agents. With regard to retail payments, they don't yet have full interoperabilities for ATMs and point of sale. So interoperability is available through the International Card Association's Visa and MasterCard, but obviously this is very expensive, so it's really interoperability is only available to high-income users. There are 3 mobile network operators in Twiga, Hugo, Paco, Luis, and also the latest entrant, Donald, so 4 shortly online, and pretty good coverage of the country, running at 80% of the country is covered, 80% of the population is covered by the mobile network operators. If we go on to the next slide, slide 12. The Central Bank of Twiga has implemented its National Payment System Act, which does provide a legal framework, and through its guidelines allows both banks and non-banks to be licensed providers of agents, although there is not an even playing field for banks and non-banks. Coverage of financial access points is pretty good in Twiga. 45% of the adult population is within 5 kilometers of a financial access point. The majority of those financial access points are actually provided by mobile money agents. That's where the bulk of them are. The central bank is also the lead on the financial inclusion strategy. They have a draft in place, but it has not yet been accepted, and it's still in ongoing discussions with stakeholders. It should also be noted that there's no flexibility for KYC, and that has been considered a challenge in the environment. So if we move on to slide 13, you'll notice there was a little more detail in the case, which is available on the website. There's an eight-page case study, but I wanted to just talk through and see if what you thought, if maybe we could have some participants who have looked at the assessment matrix within the tool. So looking at the assessment matrix starting on page, sorry, let me just check what page it's on. Starting on page 148. If you have that in front of you, you should see the 4-point score that we're using, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how we should be scoring the financial sector, in particular financial institutions. Are any of our attendees, our participants, willing to step forward and propose a score? All right, well, I will start off. Feel free to chime in as I go forward. So starting on the area of financial institutions, the choices are for a least supportive environment in financial institutions. The supportive environment for social protection payments assessment matrix says for a score 1, financial institutions focus on high-income individuals and corporate business, thus there are very few potential payment service providers available. Score 2 is financial institutions offer a small number of products that may be used by the poor, again, few potential payment service providers. Score 3, large financial institutions offer services to the poor nationally, although the extent and quality of these services may not be sufficient to the demand from the poorest, thus a choice of payment service providers but with weak products. And a score 4, the highest score, is large variety of financial institutions operating in a competitive market, some with direct experience of delivering social cash transfers, thus good choice of payment service providers with appropriate products for the poor. I would suggest that we give them a score 3 for financial institutions. When looking at financial access points, I would suggest that, again, we give them a higher score, a score 4, which, according to the matrix, multiple channels of delivery are used to ensure national coverage. With regard to interoperability, we saw during the case that interoperability has not yet been achieved for ATMs and POS. There is some interoperability with mobile money agents, so giving them a score 2. If we move on to the rules, the first set of rules we look at are agency rules. I would be giving Twiga a score 3, which equates to rules on agency exist that permit their use by banks for deposits and payments. A level playing field for banks and non-banks is lacking. Moving on to proportionate know your customer requirements, I would give a score 2. There are strict requirements mandated by the regulator and followed by the banks. When looking at e-money guidelines, that would be a score 3, which is equivalent to legal regulatory measures allowing e-money issuance by banks. Non-banks have been drafted. Pending approval, banks and non-banks are allowed to offer e-money on a case-by-case basis. We understand that the National Payment System Act, while it's been implemented, the guidelines on e-money guidelines have not yet been implemented. So that's why we're giving Twiga a score 3. Basic bank accounts, again with score 2. Some banks are offering basic bank accounts suitable for low-income customers. With regard to financial inclusion levels, we know that the national strategy is effectively draft and has not and is being underway, is being deliberated. It hasn't yet been implemented, so we would give a score 2 there. With regard to procurement, although I didn't discuss it, if you see in the longer case, which is available on the website, there are actually procurement rules in place which actually undermine innovation for the payment delivery mechanism, for the use of a payment service provider. In particular, the issue of the inability to have a contract of more than 1 year in duration, which may cause some problems. So under procurement, scoring a 1, the procurement rules undermine the realization of the government-to-person strategy and social protection strategy or program objectives. Under government payments, again, the longer case study, we know that there are a number of government payments, but there's currently no mechanism in place to coordinate these activities. Again, as a result, we would score this low because no specific framework exists. It would be a score 1. With regard to national ID, it is actually a bright spot within the country of Twiga, with over 85% of the population holding a national ID, which is unique and considered strong. There are also efforts to introduce an electronic query function from the registry held by the National ID Authority. So that's very, very positive. For national ID, a score 4. For mobile network coverage, we know that the mobile network coverage was quite good at 80%, which is equivalent to a score 4. So if we move on to the assessment of the payment delivery mechanism of the WAIT program, which is slide 16. You see here there are 3 criteria. Oops, sorry, if we go back a slide. There are 3 criteria: accessibility, robustness, and integration. Each of these criteria is broken down into a number of different areas. So accessibility is made up of cost of access, appropriateness, rights, and dignity. Robustness is made up of reliability, governance, and security. And integration is just made up of 2 subcomponents: financial inclusion and coordination. So if we move on and we look at the first criteria for assessing a payment delivery mechanism, which is accessibility. Now we know that in Twiga the WAIT program has average payment collection times for beneficiaries of 2 to 4 hours, which gives it an emerging score of 2. We can also see that the average travel time to the payment point is 2 to 3 hours, which gives again a score 2. The total cost of access is low at 5% of the value of the transfer, which gives us score 3. If we move on to robustness, now we know there are 3 components of robustness: reliability, governance, and security. So again, looking at the assessment matrix, which starts on page 141, we cross-check to see which situation Twiga's WAIT program is in, whether it scores a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4. So from latent at 1 to a more advanced payment delivery at 4. So if we're looking at the issue of reliability, which is the first component of robustness, we can see that there is a broad understanding of where delays regularly occur within the flow of funds from government, although not all the delays have been, the flow points have been written down. Actual delays are pretty good, less than 10%, which is the advanced category, which is very good within the WAIT program. There isn't actually information about what mitigating measures might have been taken to avoid delays in payment. That information doesn't seem to have been collected by the assessment, and it's not clear how comprehensive or accurate the schedule of payments in place is. We also know from the longer case study that the staff who are involved in payment delivery are paid travel allowances for only half of their trip. Effectively, they're paid to come to the district headquarters to collect the cash, but they're not paid for a return trip to deliver payment reporting information. So there may be some disincentives for those individuals involved in delivery. If we're looking at governance, again, the clarity on governance, it's not clear if the written procedures are complete. It seems that they may be weak or incomplete, and some overlapping or incomplete roles and responsibility, which would give us score 2. We can see if we look here with monitoring and evaluation and audit functions, these have not been carried out. No monitoring and evaluation, which is a score 1. And because there has been no review, there have been no adjustment of the various procedures. We suspect there's weak reporting and inaccurateness because of the failure to pay the allowances. So we end up believing that it's a fairly poor system with regard to governance. If we move on to security, we're trying to understand the risks of losses due to fraud and robbery, and because it's a manual payment system, these systems are most at risk to such security risks. Also, the security surrounding the creation of the payroll as well. There are some challenges with that. If we move on to slide 19, integration, looking at financial inclusion and coordination. So financial inclusion is really, is there a provision of an account or not? Because it's a cash-based disbursement, there is no account involved. So there's no ability to store and make a partial withdrawal. So that score is low at 1. No other financial services are available, again a low score on 1, and no interventions are provided to encourage or support the access or use of appropriate financial services. If we look at coordination, again we see fragmentation by default, not design. Different social protection programs are not coordinating. And also we have the issue of the ID. So in order to carry out an authentication, beneficiaries are required to present both a program ID as well as a national ID, and there's a manual authentication which is carried out. It does seem a little odd, given how good the national ID structure is in Twiga, that the program has gone to the additional expense of producing a program ID, which may actually be an unnecessary activity. So if we look at the score of the WAIT program, let's have a quick look at the scores. So on slide 21, we would say cost of access, this is cost of access for the beneficiaries, would score a 2, an emerging score. Appropriateness, effectively there really isn't enough information here in order to understand effectiveness of the appropriateness. Likewise with rights and dignity, I've scored 1 and 2, but there is insufficient information. I suspect that the assessment has been carried out without the benefit of the focus group discussion, which is part of the questionnaire section within the tool. So it seems like they haven't actually implemented the focus group discussions. They've just carried out the assessment from the headquarters and maybe haven't gone into the field to understand beneficiaries and field officers' experience. That may be why there is insufficient information under accessibility. Under reliability, scoring 2, governance 2, security 1, again it scores low 1 because it's a manual versus electronic system. Financial inclusion scores low because no account is provided, and coordination scores low because there appears to be little coordination across the social protection sector and little use of national ID that are available. I will end there and hand over to the next presenter. Or are we going to do Q&A now?
So actually, before we proceed with Q&A, let me give an opportunity for Harish to comment on the supporting payments environment because we're supposed to break earlier. So he will backtrack a little bit to the first part of the assessment.
Right. Thank you, Anastasia, and thank you, Caroline, for the comprehensive introduction. I just want to highlight I think the importance of the rating is essentially to identify the areas for improvement, and it's not an end in itself. So the whole idea is to identify areas for improvement. So, for example, if you take the case study, the areas for improvement which you can identify clearly based on the ratings is the need to look at expanding the kind of the reach of the financial sector, enhancing interoperability, and then also to introduce kind of the ability to open basic accounts to make it more accessible and user-friendly. And then also about kind of enabling the contracting process for the payment service providers to be more efficient and also more effective in terms of providing a more clear business case for the financial institutions. And it's very important to also look at the financial sector angle because firstly, the whole point of going towards electronic has a lot of advantages for the government and the recipient, and that automatically means that you need to look at electronic payment instruments. So there is a natural connection there. But also, we also have to look at it from the financial service providers to see that it is there's a valid business case for them. And that's why it's important to also look at the processes of contracting the G2P payment services. So let me stop here in the interest of time and to allow for time for discussion. Thank you. Over to you, Anastasia, and perhaps we could open up for questions or maybe pass it on to the next set of topics.
Okay, so now that would be a good time for question and answers on the tool. We have actually quite a few questions going on here. So I'll start with the one that has been the most popular during the presentation, which is about the digitization of payments. And there's been a bit of discussion in regards to that, which is digitization of payments always advisable? Under which conditions it's advisable? How do you know that the country is ready for the digitization? And what would be the conditions for that?
Perhaps start, Anastasia, and maybe then request Caroline and the others to come in. Very clearly, digitizing payments is certainly a desirable goal, and it's an objective towards which I think countries and programs should strive towards. But having said that, one has to really look at whether digitization makes sense at a particular point in time for all the different stakeholders. So if at a particular point, and that's why I think this framework will also help to really see whether all the enabling environment is conducive. So if it is very easy from the government perspective to move money to an account, but the challenge is for the beneficiary to be able to access the funds. And if the beneficiary has to spend a lot of time to open an account to access those funds, then very clearly their needs are not being met. So I think if it cannot be ensured that the beneficiaries have an easy and efficient way of accessing their funds, then maybe the country is not ready at that point. So I think that's the framework I think we need to look at, and that's one of the reasons why we looked at developing this tool as an institution and also collectively with other the partners to help in thinking through issues like this. Let me stop here, and Anastasiyya, if you or anybody else wants to address.
So Caroline, do you have any additional comments on this question? I guess we don't have any additional comments from Caroline on this particular question.
Yes, I was saying that it is reiterating what Harish said. The supportive environment assessment does allow to assess how ready the environment is for digitization and how supportive it would be for innovation. I think it's also important when looking at the payment delivery mechanism assessment that the three criteria are effectively show some trade-offs. So there are, in payment delivery mechanisms, there are a number of different stakeholders who have slightly different points of view. The three criteria, we're trying to make sure that those points of view were represented, but are really allowing an individual country, an individual program to balance those different points of view between policymakers, implementers, beneficiaries, payment service providers, and financial services regulators. So you could see in a situation that a move from cash-based physical delivery to digital or electronic delivery would improve scores in robustness and integration, but may actually see a lowering of scores in accessibility. So it really helps to highlight those trade-offs, and also may help to think about mitigating measures to prevent some lowering of scores or lowering of quality when implementing any changes within a system.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Caroline. Let me move to another batch of questions. I'll have two together, which is basically talking about the ISPA tool and financial sector. So the first question is, does the ISPA tool mean the integration of the financial sector's information technology systems? And the second one is talking about a country that has multiple PSPs, which is basically how would a tool address the country that has multiple payment service providers like Kenya, for example. So we can start with Harish probably on the first question.
Right. I'm not sure I understood the first question correctly, but let me respond, and then please do let me know if I have not addressed the question. I think very clearly the attempt here is to look at the kind of the interplay between the financial sector and the social protection delivery mechanisms. And very clearly, as I was mentioning earlier, when we are moving towards electronic payment or even towards moving towards cash transfers, I think there's a role for the financial sector. And to ensure that the perspective of the financial sector and also the perspective from the social protection side are integrated in a meaningful way was the reason why we looked at developing this tool. Now, with respect to the second question on in a country where there are multiple payment service providers, and I think from the perspective of the financial sector, of course, we want to reach a situation where there is no the social protection agencies don't even have to think about the payment mechanism, right? So the social protection agency deals with issues related to the design of the program, targeting, etc. They don't even have to worry about the payment delivery mechanism because there are enough payment service providers, and the ecosystem is well developed. But of course, that's an aspiration. There's a lot of progress to be made towards that. So I think there is the situation where in some countries, when you look at the payment service providers who can meet the requirements, there are not many. But looking at a scenario like potentially Kenya, which was given as an example, where there are several payment service providers, one has to see whether as part of the procurement process and as part of the design of the delivery mechanism, whether choice can be given to the beneficiary. So that the beneficiary chooses the payment mechanism which most best fits their needs and context. And that would again bring us to the point about interoperability, because when you have an interoperable payment system in the country, it makes it that much more easier. And then also it goes to it also has a bearing on the procurement process to see how the government procures a service like this, where there are several payment service providers. One approach which we have seen emerging in some countries is to allow the customer to choose and have the systems which integrate the social protection infrastructure with the financial systems, allow choice of multiple payment service providers, and offering a couple of default options for individuals and beneficiaries who do not have access to a payment service. Caroline and Sylvia, if you have anything to add, and also you, Anastasiyya.
Yeah. I would just say one thing, that in terms of thinking about the categorization of approaches, effectively there are three broad approaches. Effectively in-house delivery, so using program staff to deliver payments, which are usually associated with manual delivery. Outsourcing to a payment service provider, so frequently the program selects one or maybe two payment service provider, a limited number of payment service providers that the beneficiaries must use in order to receive their transfers. And the third is outsourcing to beneficiary choice, which was Harish was mentioning, which is really when there is an open system allowing for beneficiaries to exert market pressures, to be treated like ordinary customers, to be treated more like recipients of salary payments, where they effectively can nominate their transaction account into which they will want to receive their payment, and can switch providers at their will. And greater choice gives a greater power to the recipients, which is obviously of benefit.
Let us move on to a little bit more social protection type of questions, which is basically, there's a number of questions. So the first question is, how well suited is this tool for the short-term programs? Because some of the social protection programs are actually short-term. And then maybe let's start with this one, and then we can move on to a little bit higher level question. Caroline, do you want to start with this answer?
Effectively, the duration of the program will impact upon the recommendations, but there's no reason why this tool shouldn't be applied to shorter-term interventions and longer-term interventions. For example, the example would be, for example, humanitarian emergency payments. There's certainly aspects of the tool that are very relevant for assessing the readiness of the environment for different types of payment delivery mechanism, and also considering the use of an existing cash transfer program, assessing the quality of its payment delivery mechanism, its flexibility to allow for emergency top-ups, for example.
Harish or Sylvia, do you have comments on this one? No? Okay. So then let me also move to a slightly higher level question, which I think is something that we have thought about and then we have encountered and also it's been raised a few times here, which is what has been the experience with applying the social protection tool with the governments? How do they react to the ratings, and how do the governments react in case, especially in case of ratings that are not so favorable or not so nice? Caroline, I think you will be quite well positioned to start in this one.
Yeah. I think it's very, very important to understand how the tool works. It's not meant to be an external assessment, it's meant to be an assessment that happens within government, and effectively the scoring, you can very easily get caught up in the scoring, oh, we got a low score for this, you got a high score for that, but really that's not the point of the tool. The point of the tool is not to score. The purpose of the tool is effectively the stakeholder discussions that occur during a scoring. There is no, it is very unlikely that stakeholders would actually want to have a score 4 across all criteria, because as I mentioned before, there are trade-offs. A more robust system may be less accessible. What is more important to the stakeholders who are looking at this? So the tool is meant to, the assessment tool is meant to facilitate dialogue and discussion between stakeholders for an individual program in a particular country to understand these trade-offs and to make sure that trade-offs and decisions are being made deliberately and rather than by happenstance. And so really it is a framework for discussion, and the actual scores are less relevant. Although we know that scoring anything can be very political, that's why it's very important that the discussions are handled in a productive fashion and that the scoring itself doesn't take over the conversation, which is always the danger, particularly if an assessment is seen as an external assessment rather than as a tool which is being used by government to better understand an aspect of an existing social protection program and to improve its quality.
Harish, do you have any comments?
Yeah, just to add to what Caroline said, when you look at it from the perspective that it is an internal tool to inform policy choices and design, then we will see it from different perspectives. And this is not meant to, it's not required to be externally shared, and it's not meant to be kind of published and so on. And also it can also enable benchmarking with other services, with peer group countries and so on. So I think that's the other utility of this.
Perfect. Thank you so much to both of you. We have a bit of a follow-up question on this, which is, does the tool provide guidance on how to address weaknesses in the systems, and where to go using the results of this tool? So for this one, we can actually start with Sylvia.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for muting me. So I think the tool, probably as Caroline mentioned earlier, really gives a good understanding of where do we need to have discussions with certain other actors, as it really initiates a collaboration and a discussion between different players in the financial system as well, and not only within the social protection system. I think, and that's something that Caroline can answer much better than I do, that the tool probably is much more of an assessment tool. And so it shows you where are the weaknesses and how can we move forward to an extent to looking at certain aspects. Now at CGAP, for example, we are looking a bit more closely at what are really practical and easy practices for governments, for program managers, as well as providers, in order to make those payments more valuable for recipients, but also more viable for both the businesses and the programs. And I think there are a couple of aspects that the ISPA tool really nicely shows, where there are aspects of recipients not accessing the payments or having problems with accessibility, where then there are certain practices that are not very difficult to implement that ensure that there is a good connectivity of the instruments that are used for the digital payment systems, that there is liquidity, that there is also that there are services for recipients where they can find problem resolution and where they can address certain problems if they don't receive the payments, because it is so key that those payments are reliable, that they are convenient, and that they in the end provide value not only for the programs but also for the recipients. And there is a huge research process within CGAP in order to address those gaps of practical ideas.
Thank you, Sylvia. Caroline, do you want to add a little bit more on this?
Sure. I would say in terms of sort of providing guidance, effectively, if we look at the supporting environment review.
Caroline, are
can you hear me?
Still with us?
Yes, I'm still with you. Can you hear me?
It looks like we temporarily lost Caroline.
Okay.
Now we are trying to see if we can actually facilitate participation from the audience. We have Rush Pasnet, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, who basically, oh, somebody can hear Caroline, I can, or maybe I'm.
Anastasiyya, maybe before we pass it on, let me also add one point. As Sylvia was mentioning, there are kind of additional additional guidance available through a recent publication of the World Bank and an institution called the Committee on Payments Market Infrastructures, called the Payment Aspects of Financial Inclusion, that goes into some of those aspects, especially in relation to the regulatory framework and the design of payment products. And there are also past publications of the World Bank and other institutions, including institutions like the Better Than Cash Line, which talk to some of these points. And the ISPA document also references some of that.
Yeah, and maybe just to add to this again, I think that's also part of where the ISPA tool is now moving towards after the implementation, after we find more and more other programs using the tool. We will also see where did it help them and how did they address those issues. So we also want to build kind of an inventory of different practices and experiences using the tool, but also improving their programs based on what they found in the tool. And I think that is really a very key part of the ISPA tool to make it even more useful and even more successful, is by having more of you using it, testing it. We're going to have iterations, but we also want to have a community of practice where we share our experiences and where we share good practices amongst us.
Thank you, Sylvia. So sorry, I apparently couldn't hear Caroline when everybody could hear her perfectly. My apologies for that. But now we basically wanted to see if you could facilitate the participation of the audience while we are figuring out if that's possible. Let me just voice the question from Rush Pasnet, who I believe is from Nepal, and he has been very active in participating in the ongoing online conversation and discussing the assessment that I believe they have undertaken in Nepal. He has a very practical question which goes back to digitization, which is, isn't it necessary to obtain the beneficiary's view before digitization, digitalization of the payment system? Because, for example, in Nepal, beneficiaries prefer to have the manual cash transfer since banks are less accessible for them. So, Caroline, maybe but can you unmute?
Hi.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, can I add Anthony?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi. I'm from Nepal, and I work for a Konali employment program, social protection program in Nepal. The point here is we actually investigated a lot of cash transfer mechanisms, including government to people and digital cash transfers, many cash transfer. When we actually spoke with the beneficiaries, they want to have the direct cash transfer on their hand, and they don't have a belief in the banks, and they don't really want to go to bank because it is too far for them. Stakeholder means in this this tool is to get the inventory and information from the bank itself. So do we really capture the views of the beneficiary at all? Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your question. Harish or Caroline, do you want to answer?
I can answer if you want.
Perfect.
If you can hear me, I can answer.
Yeah. We can hear you.
Yes. So as part of the tool, there is actually a questionnaire which looks at gathering information from all the key stakeholders. And as I mentioned before, the stakeholders include social protection policy makers, program implementers at all levels, headquarters down to field officers. It does include beneficiaries and recipients. It includes the financial services regulator. It includes existing and potential payment service providers. So there's a detailed questionnaire which poses questions to all these actors in order to understand their point of view. The point I made with the Twiga study was it appeared that the focus group discussions had not occurred. But generally in a full assessment, that would take place. Focus group discussions are absolutely essential into understanding all stakeholders' point of view.
Thank you, Caroline. Harish, do you have any comments to add to that?
Yes, no, absolutely. I think that's an excellent question, and that goes to show about some of the challenges and then kind of the things which need to be taken care of. It is absolutely essential for the financial sector regulators in the country to improve the confidence in the financial sector. So I think that is something which has to be worked on, and focus group discussions can help bring those out. And the other related point is about financial financial literacy, financial awareness. That is also an important element, and I think a lot of times maybe some of the beneficiaries don't fully realize the benefits of having access to a payment service or a bank account or a mobile money account for that matter, and ensuring that the right amount of information is available to them so that they can make an informed choice is also an integral part of any effort towards digitizing G2P payments.
Thank you. And I think Sylvia can actually also comment on this, especially given her experience with consumer finance.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, my background with regard to cash transfer programs is particular in the consumer research and looking at what are the experience of the recipients when they try to access and use their payments. What we have identified is that indeed, not in all cases, a digital transfer is the best option. And it really, the key of why we deliver payments as a means for social assistance is because we believe that this is something beneficial for the recipients. But if it is not, if they can't access those payments, if they pay overly high charges that are not even authorized to access those payments, then they might actually be much better off if it is an in-kind transfer or a cash transfer. And I think the ISPA tool actually really gives a good guidance on looking at, is the market actually ready to provide for the payments, provide for liquidity? Is there a couple of providers available that can then also issue those payments and cash them out, because this is in most of the cases still the principal usage of those payments. Now what we also have found, because we use more and more behavioral research also to identify what will be the changes in recipients' value perception of those payments when we give them a choice, and that choice might be across certain providers, but it might also involve receiving cash instead of a digital payment. And so we use more and more behavioral research, and we see that actually giving a choice and looking at the preferences of recipients can be very different depending on the area that you look at. For example, from one program that we were looking at in Kenya, in very remote areas, we saw very different feedback from recipients with regard to receiving their money either in cash, receiving it on bank cards, or receiving it into their mobile wallet. And so some of that feedback was that a woman in a little bit more urban area there, where she had access to ATMs, she had access to a couple of different banking agents, she really liked her bank card and to use a bank card, because she told us, with this bank card, I have something that belongs to me and that I have control over. My husband is not interested in this. And within the family, it's clear that this money on this card is for the family. It's for food. It's for payments that are benefiting the family. So she felt more empowered and she felt to have more control over it. Now in other areas, we also see that sometimes payments to a mobile phone can be a preference for the recipients, because maybe a mobile money agent is much closer, or they see that they can use it at much more locations and have there with a broader choice of how to use their payments. Also in some cases where mobile penetration is quite high, and where also women, who are often the targeted beneficiaries, have access to mobile phones, this also provides them an opportunity to be more private and to possess something and do something in privacy that is not controlled by anybody else within their households. So we also see instances where actually this privacy of a mobile transaction and of mobile money can actually provide a lot of empowerment for women. And lastly, I also have an experience from a cash transfer program that was shifted from in-kind to receiving digital transfers, and we came to that village and wanted to talk a little bit to the recipients, and basically when they realized who we were, that we were part of the program, they were kind of really complaining and were upset and told us, go away with those digital transfers. Either you come with food or you don't have to come at all, because we cannot cash out that money and we cannot even buy anything with that money because there is no market providing us tickets. So that's just a little bit of an experience, and I also encourage our participants to look a little bit on the CGAP blog, on our blog series on customer centricity and digital payments to the poor. You can find a little bit more about this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. That's actually really cool experience. It was very nice for me to hear about a lot of this. And now we have a next question which actually ties to this topic and then brings us very nicely to the next part of our presentation, which is basically on the inventory social protection payments. And the question goes, is do we have a cutoff percentage for government for setting up NSP cash transfer in terms of transfer cost? We can start with Caroline answering it, but we also have QUANITA Alihan, who will be presenting in just after we answer this question on this social inventory payment that actually can give you maybe some of the answers to the questions that you were asking as well, and a good background for starting work on this tool. So Caroline, can we start with you?
Yes, so the assessment criteria for payment delivery mechanisms, the three criteria, the criteria are quality criteria. Obviously, price is very important in terms of the sustainability and the palatability of the transfer mechanism, but it's not specifically addressed in the assessment matrix. It is separately addressed within the guidance note, and information is provided on payment charges from payment service providers, average charges in manual systems as opposed to electronic systems, in-house as opposed to outsourced systems, and that information is in the tool itself within the guidance notes section. But I'm handing over to Juanita, who will be able to give us the most up-to-date information of the inventory exercise, which has just been recently completed.
Juanita, are you ready?
Hello, can everybody hear me clearly?
Again.
Hello?
Yes, Juanita, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Before I start, just have to apologize for a bit of a bad throat. So that's a little bit on the blame. But other than that, great to be part of the webinar and great to be giving a bit of a quick overview on the inventory and the work we're doing on it. So if you see basically the first slide of the inventory, you'll be able to see that it's, can we go to the next slide? This is just the introduction. Yeah, so if you look at the previous slide. So if you look at the inventory, the overall objective was to just have basically a combination of different ways of looking at the inventory, from a payment system delivery, from a social protection, and then the actual payment environment itself. So we're looking at it from three different perspectives, the inventory, and we're looking at overall the major social protection programs which have important cash transfer components. Now, looking at it from a perspective of how important is it to have a global understanding to develop a good payments mechanism, you look at the regulatory and the policy environment. So the first part of the inventory looks at the infrastructure in place for payment systems delivery, such as how many people have access to accounts, how many people have access to GSM, what is the GSM technology like, can you use mobile payments, can you use accounts, is there a supportive G2B infrastructure and regulatory environment in place. The second part looks at the social protection program itself. What kind of social protection program are you looking at? Is it a public works program? Is it a cash transfer? Or is it a conditional cash transfer? And how does it relate to electronic payments? And the final part of the inventory itself is the payment systems delivery. How are the payments being made? Are they supported by an electronic account? Are they supported by a debit card? Is the mobile technology being used? And finally, it's all about the lessons learned. So we have about 30 metrics that looks at the inventory. And I'm supposed to, with the team, follow up with a more detailed webinar. So the current slides are just a bit of a flavor of what's to follow, and we'll share the best practices as we move towards the next webinar. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So if you look at the inventory snapshot for the payments environment, this is what I was talking about when I was talking about the infrastructure, the policy, the regulatory landscape in place. So we have the indicators on GDP, HDI, percentage adults with accounts, percentage adults belonging to the poorest 40% with accounts, percentage of population covered by mobile network who own a mobile phone, and basically how many of the adults from the poorer segment actually get electronic payments through a cash, through an account. And if you see, we have Morocco in blue and we have Egypt in orange. So interestingly, we have different figures for each. So you have the percentage of, and unfortunately I'm not being able to zoom it on my screen, and let me just make it larger, and yes. So if you look at it, you have an interesting finding with Morocco is higher. You see Morocco having a larger, being higher in the bar chart, and it's got more people having accounts, and it's got more people having access to the, and more people from the poor, which is 40% having access to accounts. So interestingly, If you look at Morocco, you would feel that there is more inclusion because you have more access to accounts. But then will that be able to support GDP? So the next part of the inventory should be looking at the social protection environment. How will the G2P and the cash transfer make use of the payments environment to support electronic payments? So can we go to the next slide now? Hello? Okay, thanks. So the next slide is the inventory snapshot of the social protection payments. Here I've got two of those, which is the MNREGA program, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Scheme, which is being implemented in India, and the Samurdhi program, which is being implemented in Sri Lanka. These are one of the two larger cash transfer programs in the South Asian countries. And if you look at the inventory, it will give you details of who's implementing them. This is important because it shows you if it's being implemented by the Ministry of Finance or being implemented autonomously by the organization itself, which helps in the kind of leverage the organization has in terms of influencing the means they want to deliver.
Juanita, I actually think we lost you. Like, do you hear Juanita? No. Juanita, I think we are you still with us?
Anastasia, perhaps we can have Caroline cover it while she's joining. Is that an option?
Yeah. Okay, so let's Caroline cover this slide, and then we'll see if Juanita comes back.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, so we seem to have lost connection with Juanita, so we were just wondering if you could quickly cover the rest of the inventory.
Yep, that's fine. So the inventory has 30 different matrices within it. These are just a small number of matrices that we're looking at. If I just quickly count them, it looks like we're looking at 8 different matrices. But we also this is for looking at the program objectives, understanding the targeting mechanism, the geographic focus, and how the payment service provider may be selected. If we move on to the next slide. So this is looking at the payment delivery mechanism within an individual program. So here we have examples from Mexico and Bangladesh. There are nearly 40 countries within the inventory that we have completed. We look here at the payment approach, and we look at who the payment service provider is, what the payment mechanism is being used, if there's an account that is being provided, what encashment rules. So for example, do you have to cash out 100%, or are you permitted to leave some balance within the account? And also, is there support of other, is there access to other financial services? So for example, if you have an account...
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
I think something happened to my system, so I'm back now. I'm really sorry for the confusion, and thanks so much, Caroline, for covering in. Really grateful. Thanks. So basically, we're looking at it from the payment systems delivery mechanism, and if we have a look, Caroline's covered it really nicely. You see Mexico and Bangladesh. Mexico is one of the premier cash transfer programs, which has an electronic payment card, which is a max type card. It has electronic accounts, and interestingly, it also has access to other financial services. And Mexico, being one of the larger conditional cash transfer programs, has also got pilots of financial inclusion and literacy. So that's like the whole 9 yards. You've got the full spectrum that you can have. And in fact, they're working with a payment switch now to enhance access using all kinds of agent networks for their beneficiaries. The Prospera program, as it's known now, it started as Opportunidades. Bangladesh, on the other hand, provides a large array of services but does not use a regular commercial bank or a regular finance institution, and they're using the Bangladesh Post. So that just shows how you don't need to always have a financial institution. I won't go into the benefit of having one and not having one right now, but the Bangladesh Post is giving access by giving the Bangladesh Post cash card to beneficiaries, and that's allowing them to cash out at agent locations across the country, as well as the Bangladesh Post offices, which are used as cash out points. Now, generally, in countries, the postal network has a large access. So utilizing that for social cash transfer payments is a smart move on their part, and they're getting an e-money account. And obviously, if you're working through a postal bank, you're getting more financial services. So this is something interesting to look at. So basically, if you see these three areas of the inventory, the environment, which looks at what kind of systems do we have in place, where are the gaps, do we have a GSM or a mobile network to support, do we have financial inclusion in terms of the poor having access to electronic accounts. You match that with the social protection program details. Where is it placed? What's the coverage? Is it a national program? And how can we support it further to have electronic cash transfers or efficient cash transfers? And then finally, we look at the last part, which is the payment delivery mechanism, which studies the kind of infrastructure and the payment delivery mechanism in place that delivers cash. This part of the inventory also looks at the contracting procedures and the costing. And I'm coming back to the question that was asked during the panel earlier, was what is the average cost that you have for delivering digital payments? So generally what we've seen with countries is that it's called service charges, and the service charges are varying from 2 to 5% in different countries for the cash transfers. Service charge is basically a percentage you take for delivering that cash amount, and it depends on the remoteness of the region. A question that was asked earlier, and I'm trying to see if I can weave that in. How and is it always advisable to launch digital payments? So you have the example of the Philippines that decided to use the Land Bank of Philippines to launch the Land Cash Card. So the cash card went before the electronic payments delivery system, and now they've got the cash card plus other mechanisms of payment, and one of them also includes manual, which is for a very small percentage of the population. But that proves that you may not be able to go digital for the entire 100% of your beneficiaries. Similarly is the case for Pakistan. If you look at it, it's one of the leading countries for financial inclusion, innovation for G2P payments, but the largest program, which is the Benazir Income Support Program, which delivers 90% cash through electronic means, also has about 7 to 8% which delivers through manual postal money orders given the remoteness of the region. So digital payments can be looked at in different ways. And looking at something interesting, if you look at the Latin American countries from the inventory, they've had a lot of innovation that they've done because they've been the pioneers in launching social cash transfers. So now they're moving more towards a payment systems delivery perspective. How can they develop cohesive payment systems? And if you look at Peru, it's investing in BEM, which is a payment system delivery mechanism, rather than investing in agents and networks. So that's how some of the countries are evolving. Rather than looking at an instrument, they're looking at a systems approach. So it's different for every country and where its digital payments journey is starting from. And sometimes it makes sense to have a presidential announcement to launch digital payments because that's where you need the push, such as the case of Philippines. But sometimes you need to also look at it from where the beneficiaries are, as in the case of Nepal. They launched with biometric payments, and now they're looking at what's the most effective way of working with beneficiaries in remote regions. So we have a lot of interesting examples which will come in our upcoming webinar. Can I have the next slide, please? Everybody can hear me now, right? So yeah, so basically these are the countries we're looking at. We're looking at the UFA countries, which are about 25. You can see them. Then we have regional strategic SP countries, the social protection countries, where we have interesting social protection programs. And these are included basically from the perspective of their flagship programs for cash transfers, such as Uganda, etc. And then you have the World Bank strategic engagement countries, such as Nepal and Sri Lanka, which may not be a UFA country, but you have a very interesting program called Samurdhi, and Nepal is coming up for the social cash transfer program. And they have done their innovation by launching biometric payments in remote areas of Nepal. So that's interesting to look at. And as we move forward, I'd love to share feedback on this. Can we go to the next slide now?
Yeah, I think that was a really nice introduction to the inventory and what it will be about. And there are, of course, a couple of questions that are popping up. Since time is very short now, I want to keep it to one question only and then encourage the audience to participate in the next webinar that will focus on the inventory. So, QUANITA, if I may ask you just, will this inventory, will it be public, and will this be something that also other researchers and other programs can use in order to get some ideas of what are others doing and what are the systems in place in other countries? Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvia. So this is part of the ISPA work, and since most of the ISP work is public and distributed, so I'm assuming that we'll be able to collect the best practices and disseminate them. Yes. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. So basically, the inventory is part of the ISPA tools and is part of the ISP working group's exercise on collecting best practices. So we will have best practices and country examples available. Where we may not be able to publish all the information is some of the costs and some of the contractual agreements, which were shared as confidential by the partner agencies. But we'll be able to share the different models and mechanisms they're using for contracting and averages of payments, etc.
Excellent. Thank you, QUANITA. So I would also like to thank the audience who stayed for 5 more minutes, and also for your patience with some of our technological problems, since we are connecting from different countries around the globe, as you, our participants, are as well. There are sometimes a couple of issues coming with it. So thanks to all the speakers as well, Harish and Harish and Anastasia, Caroline, and Luz. And as you can see on this very last slide, there's another webinar coming up early enough, and we will let you know when this will be. Thank you very much.
Thank you.